Hear me? Yes. Good. So we started this morning by motivating the importance of supply chain, right? I'm putting some keywords here: complexity, lack of control. I hope this is crystal clear what we mean by complexity, right? This is different than this, right? That doesn't mean that on top we can add uncertainty and things we don't have control on, okay? We're talking lack of control on processes. Supply chain is a set of processes, right? And supply chain decisions can be reduced to drawers. Again, I don't want to minimize of the difficulty and challenges of managing supply chain, to how many drawers we said, how many drivers? 6. Logistical, bravo. So top down, logistical, and cross-functional. And anybody remember the logistical? Inventory. Information, sourcing, and pricing. Let me open a small bracket on pricing before we continue. We talked about the different challenges. I'm just going to keep the word visibility, right? Cost containment, changing environment, or globalization. All right? Just a couple of words on pricing. We learned a lot from the airline industry. From the airline, in a sense that airline realized in the 80s that pricing can be an amazing lever to match supply and demand. At the end of the day, what is supply chain management? Is trying to match supply and demand in an effective way that's basically profitable, efficient, and so on. And what airline realized is that price is not only for marketing, for value that customer are ready to pay from that point of view. Of course, it's still about the value, but it's a way to manage supply and demand. And that's why they realized, really, and now we take it for given, that if you call early, you're going to get a lower price. And if you call late for a flight, you'll get a much higher price. And the reason is that when we called early, we had the entire plane empty, so we didn't know whether we were going to fill it. And so basically we said, okay, let's be pragmatic, sell certain seats cheaper. As we fill this plane, then the seat becomes more expensive, even though it's the same seat, economy, right? But what is allowing us to say is that given that there are enough that are ready to pay more, why would I pay it at less, sell it at less, correct? So it is a lever, it's like a button. I want to fill my plane, I reduce my price, so we call this dynamic pricing. And so that's why pricing is also, among other reasons, part of the supply chain, because it's matching supply and demand. This is not a price that I set independently of my supply. Am I making sense? And of course, Uber and the like are building on this, and there's no reason for manufacturing not to also, build on these similar ideas, right? And there is an explanation for this. From an economics point of view, you're paying more for the seat that you called late on because I reserved it for you. Someone else wants it cheaper, but I didn't sell it. I kept it for. I didn't know it was you, Suzanne, that were going to show up, but I knew that someone, or hopefully someone, will show up later. Are we clear? Yes.
Just to build on that, I'm sure most of the attendees know we have, over the past 3 years, acquired 2 companies in Europe. And they are specialized in what we call excess stock. And they're exactly as you have defined in the manufacturing of FMCG. So these companies go to the FMCG manufacturers like P&G, like Henkel, like Unilever, and tell them what excess stock you have that you are unable to sell. So they will come and they will say, for example, we have, we have Head and Shoulders of a particular size or a particular scent.
Right.
We have 20 container loads which we are not able to sell. And our buyers come and tell them, we're ready to buy all of these 20 containers for at a 50% discount, and we pay you cash. And they ship them to us, and then we resell them at a profit margin.
So their role as this company is the agent between the manufacturer and you. That's
No. That these companies are distribution entities by themselves, but they have a different distribution model.
Okay.
The business model is a different model.
Clear. Very clear. Excellent.
Yeah.
Right. So indeed, you have all these different. And please jump in and share with us, when it makes sense, a particular experience or a point which will enrich also the discussion, and leave it to some extent up to me. If we're a little bit, in time, I will manage it, but don't worry about that. Let me manage that. If there is something that you think can enrich the discussion, don't hesitate. Yes.
Same applies on the 3PL business. We have also
AAA.
some of 3PL.
TPL.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
we
third
have
party
our
version.
exactly. So which based on pallet position, availability, and this reflects on the pricing as well. The same example you gave on the.
So it reflects on the pricing how?
So if there is an availability and there is a high demand,
yeah.
we'll raise the price.
Exactly,
And
right?
if
The
it's
Uber-like
free,
model,
so
right?
Drop somehow the
Yeah,
price
exactly.
to the cost maybe.
Right? Very true. Good. So we stopped here. We said, and there is a natural linkage, huh? Really, that's why I tell you there is always a story in what I'm trying to do. We talked about the AAA. Can someone remind me the A's?
Agile,
Agility, which we'll come back to.
adapting, and
Alignment
adapting.
and adaptability. And adaptability is adaptability to changes, whether technology, markets, and so on, right? And so sustainability is a major change that is happening, that is bringing its own constraints, and it's all maybe opportunities. Am I making sense?
Yes.
And hence, it's part of the adaptability to the supply chain to adapt, right? So that's the story, right? It's not, chapter 5, sustainability. Okay? And so what is sustainability? Anybody can give a definition. How do you, understand sustainability?
The link between sustainability and supply chain, or
So the definition cannot contain sustainability.
maybe cost saving.
That you went extra mile here. No, let's define it first. Let's start on clear definition of what we mean. Nida.
Reduce the footprint of environment.
So again, reducing is a attribute, right? You're being optimistic. But sustainability is independent of whether you're reducing or not. It's
Environment friendly.
so environment friendly, okay. So there is the environmental dimension is sustainability. Clean sourcing.
Reuse of resources.
Reuse of resource. Why you didn't say it earlier? I'm going to come back to that one. No, but everything else is also correct.
I think for me, sustainability is finding the right balance, because you need to find the right balance with environment, demand, supply, pricing, affordability.
Okay, so you're saying it's not only about environment. Otherwise, Victor, we would have called it environment. Right? We call it sustainability probably because there is some balance, you're saying, correct? Okay, so before that, what's the English definition in your mind of sustainability? Huh? Long-lasting. Continuity. I exist tomorrow, basically, right? To some extent. And really, the definition is interesting. So I want to share the official with some sense. It's the development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generation to meet their own needs. I really like it. Okay? So in a sense that, okay, if you bring me batteries to drive, fine, use the fuel. But if I need fuel to drive tomorrow, don't use it all. Right? Kind of a simplistic, way to reduce it. Correct? Same thing. If we can live with a climate that is changing tomorrow, fine. But if basically I'm going to have to leave my country in Africa and start, etc., and I will not have water, etc., then, be careful how you're actually producing or using these resources. Are we clear? Right. So, very much on. Now, indeed, that dimension, which is really a societal dimension, right? It's a society, it has philosophical, but also, societal, first and foremost, has implication on businesses because who are polluting, right? And so it makes sense. So the notion, indeed, now is not reduced, but reflected through what we call the 3 Ps, which is what? Yeah, people like to start with profit, but you can start with people, you're right. People, profit, and planet. Right? And that's, you know, there were a trend eventually, and which for good reason, and I have no, you know, whatsoever, I don't find this competitive, competing with sustainability the way we see it in supply chain, is this notion of CSR, right? And CSR is what? What's CSR? Corporate social responsibility. It's basically saying, look, continue doing what you're doing, but think that you belong to a society, so give back, right? Think about that dimension, build schools, you know, try to pollute less, do all these efforts, right? But as a citizen of the world. So it was too gentlewoman man type, right? While in fact, the problem is so real and so serious, it cannot be only taken through you giving back, right? And so, really, today sustainability is way beyond, right? And, you know, Amazon cannot today have a report or talk to the public or talk strategy or growth without having, you know, sustainability at the heart of what they're doing. The biggest polluter, right? By size, right? Is it because you're large, I should penalize you more? Yes. World would tell you yes, because they can do more, right? It's centralized, we want to take advantage of that and so on. So what we're saying is that there is no way we are actually, you know, hiding behind this. But I started before the break by telling you, should we look at this as a cost, a burden? It's something we don't want to follow, but we have to. Or there are more to this. There's this question that I would like to come to bring some elements together with you to that question. And the second thing is, why in supply chain management? Okay? Or it should be in every course or every function or every department, right? Because that's another thing, like ethics, right? You know, if I'm looking at it from an academic point of view, I don't talk in an ethics only in one course. It should be in every course, right? And same thing with in a company, right? Ethics should be in every department, it's part of a culture and so on, right? So should we see sustainability like this? Or is it really mainly about supply chain management? Okay? So first, is this real or conspiracy? I don't know. We're not going to do here a vote on this. Scientists seem to agree. Of course, there are some that question that, so just to be clear. But typically, the world have agreed, at least scientists and governments, that this is the case. Of course, you always have some questioning that. At the end of the day, you know, it's not like, you know, by doing that, we're doing something wrong. Everything we're doing, the worst case scenario would be that we're doing a lot about something that is not as major as we thought. We agree? But we're not doing anything anyway bad. So I think that's why, you know, also this is happening. But clearly, all the science is showing this, right? You know, when we look at how difficult it is like to reduce CO2 emissions, after all these years, you know, starting with, you know, the Kyoto Accord and, you know, meetings that are forcing people to think and government and so on, yet, I don't know if you took regression in your life at one point. Or there's a line. It's going straight. It's like nothing is stopping this. Right? We had some good news through COVID. You know, that will, but back to some extent a trend. Right? This is a deforestation. I mean, it's unbelievable what's happening, right? And of course, we're not going to get into the science. Now, the first question I ask myself is this going to stay? Is it a cycle and so on, right? Basically, from an economic point of view, number one is cost of material and energy is going to continue to grow, right? This is based on experts. Resources is lacking. There's no reason whatsoever to think that this raw material, right, is going to drop in price, okay? So we cannot dismiss it because from packaging to, you know, anything we're doing, right, packaging at all levels, from boxes to the material, etc., is linked to that material. So it's really the raw material that hurts us all. There's a public pressure, right, that is growing regarding these, right, in terms of societies that are being affected, poverty and so on, but also industries that are, skiing slopes that are disappearing almost, right? I mean, of course, much worse in African countries where there is no water and so on. Regulations, that's going to come back and increase, and we don't see it as being reversing soon. International agreements, right? In terms of, if you want to work with us, if we want to partner, if you want a part of the kind of EU consortium, these are the regulation to enter. These are the contracts, the partnership that in. And so if you want to grow your market, then this becomes a way to enter. Awareness on these triple bottom line is the 3 Ps. Profit, planet, and people. That's the 3. Okay? And so there were a lot of reluctance on this, and I will discuss it in a minute with the Walmart case. But there were studies that show, are people ready to pay more for sustainable products? When I say sustainable here is greener, right? And by greener is basically that we're emitting less CO2 and we're working with suppliers under certain civilized rules, right? No child abuse, no all of these, all right? And so if we're thinking about green products, sounds like more expensive. Are people ready to pay more for that? A legitimate question. So that's different than this one, right? And it's different in the following sense, that some people will say, okay, do you care about the climate? Yes. Do you want people to pollute less? Yes. Are you ready to pay more for it? No. Okay? And can you afford as well, right? And so, exactly, I don't want to minimize of that as well, I mentioned, but afford or wanting, etc., right, is a serious question. Now, we do see this, right, that people in some markets, in some level of the economy where people are paying more for less polluted product, but this is not just given, just because you believe in this cause that you're ready to pay more for the T-shirt or for the shirt or for that product. Are we clear? Good. There's an antipathy to globalization, and we're seeing it, right, all over the world, right? And it's manifesting itself in a different way, sometimes good way, bad way. And then there's what I'm calling the sustainability risk. Again, sustainability risk means that, a disaster that happened, natural disaster, due to climate change, that will make a supplier out of business, right? And, you didn't predict it, expect it, and so on, right? So there are these risks. There are also the risk of regulation that you didn't expect it, you didn't see it coming, right? All these are part of this sustainability type risk, right? And it could be a risk for you, again, whereby, you cannot enter a market because where you're coming from, there's no partnership with respect with this country, or you don't meet the criteria needed as a company. So I don't think there is doubt about this is not a trend, this is not a fashion, it's a reality of things. Again, independent of what we might think or might question in certain cases. We need to be pragmatic, we're managing businesses and we want to grow. Again, my own feelings on this are clear, but this is not the space to only speculate on this. I think the pragmatism is number one when we're talking about this, and we can discuss other things. Now, I want to hear your point of view on this. So, this whole trend, is this a trend for you? Fashion? Don't get anchored by what I said as much as possible, and really feel free to tell me what you think. Wael.
At a certain point, you see it is like becoming a trend or a marketing tool just to push more sales in market under the umbrella of sustainability, that we are creating something new, trying to see the features, and it's to see it win-win for the one who is promoting it and for the customer. Marketing is becoming too much severe, and they want to initiate or create new ideas to push sales, and I think they are using the environment or all factors that everyone get emotionally affected, and they are using it.
There's something called, by the way, and it's documented, greenwashing, right? So greenwashing means that exactly what you're alluding to, which is using a good cause to actually over amplify and then push for certain.
Ride the
items.
wave, it's sustainability. Let us use it in all anger, especially in business.
Again, but let's put this in context, Wael, in a sense that, anything, but I just want to know, I'm not re-saying what you're saying. You could say that this is the main thing, right? And indeed, there is some truth to the climate change and the issues, but really the main thing is this greenwashing. People are taking advantage. Or you can say, you know what, this is a real cause. We're all affected. It's gonna, right? And any system or regulation or efforts that will try to stop this, some people take advantage of that by, pushing the border in here and in there. Am I making sense, the difference between the two? Right? So it could be seen in both ways. Which one are you alluding to? More the first one or the second one?
I'm seeing it as also a way to start spreading awareness for the new generation that, listen, we have limited resources, and especially you see on social media, focusing on what's happening.
But it's true or not?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
true. It
Okay.
is true.
So, but again, you're talking about the former, what I said, or the latter? Like, do you really think that,
No, I think it is. They are using it in a way, benefiting from it to promote, to grow business or to start expanding. They are at certain point abusing it for the sustainability.
But you're questioning the real. But just to be clear, sorry, I'm insisting. Are you questioning like the people that are taking advantage, or the seriousness of the issue itself?
No, seriousness of the issue itself.
So you don't think it's a serious issue?
At the beginning, yes, but if you see now, everyone is dropping it, just taking care about the competition and the prices. You don't see too much marketing on any product. At the beginning, it was yes, but now, honestly, I'm not seeing it as matter as just pricing and a product that you really want to receive it on time at a competitive price for everyone.
No, but okay, that's a difference. Mazen, yeah. George, go ahead.
Yeah, I think for myself, I won't agree with Wael. I see it really a serious issue because there are a lot of facts, numbers that are documented, and we can see them everywhere. And they are, if I may say, bulletproof things.
But don't you agree that also some people are taking advantage of that to, push certain items and so on?
Yeah, but I do think that I have to do something myself, regardless of what's happening maybe elsewhere. I can maybe coordinate or get more, if you want, alignment with other concerning entities. But when it comes to myself, if I understood your question, Doctor, I think it is a real thing.
Okay. Mazen, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, yeah. I also think, as you said, it is strategic. It's happening. The data confirms it. Science confirms it. We see it in our daily lives. It's on the news. The fires, the caps in the North Pole, etc. So it is something that is a reality. So we cannot disregard it. We cannot. And then to the latter question, are people taking advantage of it? Greenwashing, of course. But in every difficult situation faced, there are always people who try to take advantage. But those who take advantage cannot make it less strategic. So it is strategic, it is happening, it is important.
Okay. Others? Why we're discussing this, just to make sure, because this is not there is the second word in A is alignment. All right? If we are basically, adopting sustainability as a burden, we're not aligned with this. You see what I mean? We're seeing it as a cost, while in fact, it's and if it is, that's alignment is somehow important. And so kind of like discussing this, is also important to kind of like converge, at least spell out things. There were a hand here. Roy, go ahead.
Yeah, just wanted to mention that I definitely agree with sustainability. Maybe it's a hype right now, but it's something very important. Now, the point is some countries and governments are giving some incentives maybe to organizations to go green by giving them, I don't know, maybe better bank rates and stuff. Now, the question is, when it comes to consumer, like what would drive me to pay more? What incentives would I care about nature? Would I care about sustainability? Maybe yes, but am I willing to pay more to do this? I'm not sure. So
I mean, on this, I don't know if you follow French politics, but I don't know if you remember the movement on called Gilets jaunes, the yellow whatever. Remember? Do you remember what drove this? What started it? It was the most, in some sense, respected green expert in France, who became Minister of Environment, who increased by very little the price of gas. And it drove the movement like the WhatsApp increase in 2000, when was it? 19, correct? Really, it was crazy movement by a slight increase. And what was, exactly what we're saying is that there is a minister who said, I'm coming in order to make changes. People were not ready to pay that now. Of course, there are a lot of other frustration that got channeled through that, right? Let's be very clear as well. But, what we're really saying that eventually people can feel it much more than others. And again, it's like the poorer are paying the price of, it was seen as well as like this. So it's extremely complicated thing, and reducing this to yes or no, I think it will be, we're not doing it fairness. Someone else had a hand. Firas, was it you, I think? Yeah.
I was saying when it tends to have an impact on the person himself, they go more sustainable about it. So if something you eat, it affects you personally, then you're gonna pay more for it. But if it doesn't affect you personally, then...
So interesting, for example, when they did a survey out of Walmart and asked them, are you ready to pay more? They said no, unless if it's for example, they were asking them about t-shirt, cotton t-shirt, you want it to be green, right? For the babies, right? So when it touches you internally, this kind of reveals that you indeed, you don't want to take the risk, or you believe in it, but there is some extent where I'm ready to pay, because at the end of the day, I want to finish my months as well in some acceptable way. Suzanne.
For food service, because I'm working in food service, we have customers asking for sustainable products. They want to know from where the fish is coming, if they have all the certificates necessary. So they are also promoting in the hotels, the 5-star hotels, the fine dining, sustainability on the menu. So it is a tool, but we have on the other side the customers who are only checking the price, and even with this, it's now very difficult to promote a product with only the price.
With only the price.
Yeah,
but back to Wael's point, because like when you're paying something more because it says that it's certified or green, is it the fact that it's really cost more, or because the restaurant decided that because those that are ready to pay more are actually sensitive to this dimension, and I will price, even though it cost me less as a restaurant, not as a fisherman, right? Cost me less to buy this item. Am I making sense? And which we all do it in terms of price discrimination. If I think that you really care about this, even though it cost me 5, I might put it at 10. And this one that cost me 7, I'll put it at 8 because you're not ready to pay more than 8, right? Which is the right mentality, by the way, from a pricing point of view. However, when this is impacting something much more serious in terms of investment of companies and others, then it has to be to some extent regulated. So just to be clear on this point, because I will be the first one not to agree, that if you are ready to pay for this $10 and it costs me 1, I should price it at 10. Because I'm bringing value and I'm really good to for $1. And this item, it's costing me 7, but you're not ready to pay more than 8, I should put it at 8. Right? And by no means I should price based on cost. So I will be the first one to promote for this. However, when it comes to some dimension like sustainability that is affecting regulations and how people are investing and partnership, etc., it cannot be just left for people to take advantage and then destroy a reputation, right, like greenwashing and so on, of a real cause if we believe it is one. All right? Just to close and make sure I'm clear on my point. Yes. I will go to you, Mohammed. Yes.
Sorry, ما بعرف الميكرو إذا بيمشي. So basically, from my point of view at least, it is indeed a greenwashing. And an example that I've never heard that NGOs took any decision regarding the war makers, especially in Gaza and what happened recently to pollute at least the earth as
No, that's... no, but again, let's differentiate, if you don't mind. If you don't mind, as in like, I respect the point a lot, not a little, actually. And I have used something similar when discussing with others. However, what I want to differentiate is wrongdoing, is people taking advantage, is basically people, lacking the courage, is people, all of this with the reality of things, right? And it cannot be changing bulbs that will make us from a major disaster, in terms of climate change. You see what I mean? I think the two things are separate, and indeed, public pressure, cannot be this, selective. The public pressure cannot be like those people, we don't look at them, and the others we focus. I fully agree on this, right? But I think we need to separate the two things in some sense, and by no means by actually adopting or realizing the importance of the real issue is encouraging this, right? Yes.
Do you think we will reach a certain point and become mandatory? Now they are giving the choice, giving an incentive.
So my point is that we will fail if it's mandatory. I think it means that the world has failed. But the whole point is to convince, and that's what I'm trying to say. That's why I started by saying, and I have credibility in this because I seriously, I don't want to swear, but I really started this thing by being completely skeptical. And my man, I told you what I said earlier. Right? You're a smart guy. You're running this organization. You're going to tell me now that a regulation is better for me? I would have created that regulation. I don't need you to put me a regulation if it's better for me. Am I making sense? But I start giving you some elements of why actually this logic is incorrect. Because of the tenure of the CEOs, right? And other things, which I will argue for in a minute. Okay? Yes.
Yeah, so I think it really boils down to these two very crucial components, being the education, the awareness that corporations have to do today as well. And it boils down to the price as well. So education, awareness, and price, whether the consumer is willing to pay a little bit more for that sustainability products.
But, I think if we take the price as a given, it's not going to work. What I'm trying to say is that there is an entire investment that we need to put, right? We can't just say electric cars are more expensive. It's not going to work. What we want to do is actually stop R&D on the normal, and right, that's the major thing, and then improving the cost so that electric cars becomes affordable. That's right. So that takes much more time, much more than just saying, I'm an observer, right? I'm actually a proactive person. All right, so first we answer this. I opened the bracket because I think it's important that we hear different voices on this because that's the reality of things, right? And then now I'm starting to answer the second question, which is why supply chain, right? So if you buy any book, if you start reading on all the issues regarding sustainability, they come back to this. So this is taken from basically an expert writing a book on sustainability. These are the issues. Guess what I put in red and beyond even? So we're talking global warming, climate change, ozone layer depletion, air pollution, waste management, overpopulation, but not only. So there's a much more waste because of overpopulation, but because we don't manage well. And the food supply chain is, disaster. Renewable energy, right? Effective food model, land use, biodiversity, water, deforestation, sustainability of ocean and fisheries. You look at this and say, these are all components of the supply chain. It's not like I need to make any effort for it to match. All the issues, or most of them, are supply chain issues. When you say, for example, fisheries, you're telling me that my supply is not available. How should I produce? What do I do without it, right? But you're telling me that waste, what is waste? Who is generating waste? The supply chain generates, right? Because you ordered more than what you need, the remaining you waste. Am I making sense? So you take every one of them, it is a supply chain. More. If I look at today, again, based on expert, I'm not one of them. I'm not an environmental expert. But if you look at experts in environment that are telling you what are the 4 biggest opportunities to have major impact on sustainability, they will tell you transportation, packaging, suppliers engagement, alignment with consumers. That's supply chain. I mean, I didn't create this. We can't just say, you know what, we continue doing, and then another entity will be responsible of trying to reduce the CO2 or we can't. If all these are embedded directly, right, organically in our supply chain function, whether we own it or not, whether we have control on it or not, right? And by no means I'm saying, you know what, packaging should be regulated. We need to be pragmatic, of course, right? At the end of the day, this is affecting the cost, and the cost is basically, like we said earlier, if it's too expensive, then some people will not be able to get it, which is problematic in a different way. The solution is not easy, right? But we cannot separate, in my mind, the two. Am I making sense? If we look at the fundamental areas of sustainability and supply chain, number one is design, what we call a green product, right? So in other words, you heard this expression, cradle to cradle, C2C? So in other words, you build the chair that will be completely recycled, right? And so that's different than basically, this is major dimension that will have a huge impact, right? You take a photocopier like Xerox, they are one of the first investors in recycling items. Most of the components of a Xerox can be recycled, right? So design is critical in doing that. Leaner is greener, right? What is leaner? To some less waste, less inventory, just in time like, right? Despite what we lived with COVID, with, you know, but eventually having more than what you need is actually now not only cost, but pollution, right? So leaner is greener, that's what we're saying. And not sure how much time we'll have to tackle this, but it's something that I really think it's underestimated its power and not enough discussed. The quality management approach, I'm going to call this, okay? I will open a bracket, let me just finish first. And not more important, is as importantly, the closed loop supply chain. Remember when I told you at the beginning, we defined the supply chain together, but you missed something? It's the closed loop. What we're basically saying is that there's a forward supply chain that starts with raw material to production, manufacturing, distribution, eventually delivery, consumption, but not only. Consumption could be an iPhone, could be the Barilla. But what do you do with the box of the Barilla and what do you do with the iPhone? In both cases, there's another cycle that starts. It might end up by you throwing it in the garbage, right? Or continues through a recycling process, remanufacturing, right? Or reusable. Thank you. And it's very interesting. H&M having, of course, it's a marketing dimension. I'm going to get used to using this here, right? It's a marketing dimension. H&M saying, we have a platform for reusable clothes. So basically, the sustainability at H&M is, one dimension is the cotton you're using, or the material fabric. They have some technology where supposedly you can reuse this scarce, kind of scrap it and then remanufacture, which is amazing, right? It's very much technology driven. And there is another one of reusing, where you basically take this item and then share it in the platform, sell it, resell it to some extent, right? And people will, after it's cleaned and so on, like the bottles of Pepsi, right? We had this long time ago, right? Yeah. I mean, these are important things. And what is, are we clear on these three dimensions? You can see the stronger linkage with supply chain. That's why supply chain cannot be independent of that dimension. You design, tell me what to do, and I build for you. I have a seat on the table, right? Because it's strategic, right? And it's at the beginning, we need to be, it's again a trade-off. I'm not saying that sustainability will take over everything else. What I'm saying is going to be one dimension. You will see it in the next couple of slides, okay? So I'll be clearer in the next one. But I want to open a small bracket on this because, this is something extremely, it's major. So there's something called the forward supply chain and the reverse supply chain. How this is linked to the story, again, as part of how supply chain will be impact positively the sustainability, we talked about design, leaner is greener, and closed loop supply chain. In that closed loop supply chain, what does it mean? Is the reverse supply chain. Now, what is important that this reverse is much less regulated than the forward. And in forward, you have a manufacturer shipping to a distributor, right? They ship to the wholesaler and then to the retailer and to the consumer. The return, much less, right? Is there point where you go put your iPhone or your Samsung? I'm not in favor of one brand with the other, or etc. Computers, batteries, etc. This is in the electronics, right? How much we do with food after the restaurant at the end of the day. This whole thing is much more ad hoc than the forward, right? But this is the one that is hurting more, right? Obviously, the reverse. Of course, it's the result of the forward, so that cannot give more importance to one to the other. I retract. But my point is that it's not regulated. And for me, these are interesting opportunities. As soon as there is something that is ad hoc, that I think is important, it's an opportunity for a business. Because if the NGOs will fill this is not sustainable, to use the word, right? NGOs cannot be responsible of taking the, we can do it now as a transition period, but eventually it has to be systematic and scalable. An NGO has today a particular fund coming, tomorrow they don't, right? So they can fill a gap, we can learn, they can help, but they cannot, to something else replace companies, private sector, to take over, right? So again, I gave some details here. I'm not gonna, but really there is a market there. There are operational issues. There's a business. There is an entire, multi-business supply chain in the reverse that is not done right. I think great opportunities. Yes. For the forward, right. For the back, of course, there is little. I'll give you an example of a small startup in India, actually. But again, I completely agree that most of the time, right? It's sometimes the government regulate, etc., like Singapore, etc. They have more of a, control on some part of the processes. But for others, yes, it's left for awareness, like you were saying, right? This recycling and so on. Important. Again, this is, my hat that I'm wearing here is the hat of business driving management, right? This is not about, only about awareness, right? What I'm saying is that I see this as a great opportunity for businesses to take over this part. That's what I'm saying. So, in the middle of this complexity that we've been talking about, forward, backward, regulation, adaptability, and so on, if we think about what are we trying to do at a really high level, we are today in a classroom. We can dream, right? This is not reality yet. If I want to dream about what will be the objective of a supply chain, the objective is to maximize the value of the entire supply chain, as if I own the whole thing, what we call vertically integrated. If the supply chain is vertically integrated with everything that it depends on, then I will make the right decision if my objective is the right objective. But reality is that it's never going to be that you own the entire thing. And so our role is to try to think about how to maximize the system-wide while being just one big entity. And naturally, not because it's a human thing, etc., but naturally because we have different objectives, the lack of alignment. That's why this is under alignment. The lack of alignment and other constraints will make that you make decisions that are not necessarily good for the entire supply chain, but they look good for you. My favorite example is cabs driving in a highway. Everybody wants to go from point A to point B in the least possible time. You agree? And that will be achievable if no one changes lanes. No one brake. We all are in the same we all want the same thing. We're aligned. But we end up being, centric, selfish, see space and jump, break suddenly because we're talking or whatever, and suddenly other people are breaking. Uncertainty is the enemy of efficiency, and we're going to end up taking all much longer because we all try to be selfish. Am I making sense? It's the best example you can have of a supply chain, that's simple to kind of like view. And so how can I, without having dictatorship and authoritative government, to actually tell you, we can imagine this when we will have automated cars, right? With how we call them, self-driving. Thank you. Self-driving cars will be perfect, right? Until then, but you can see how the centralized becomes important, right? But otherwise, basically, which we're never gonna be in our supply chain, how to think about ways to make the system look like as if it's centralized, because it will never be. And if you don't see the supply chain function, objective is this, you will take the space that is empty and you will hurt the entire supply. But it's very hard not to take it, because you will say, if I don't take it, someone else will take it. And I'm measured on this, I told my wife I'm coming at 6. I mean, they didn't tell their wives. So I'm taking this. All right? So keep that in mind. It's really important because it sounds very theoretical. That's why I said it's in the classroom. We can say this as if it's theoretical. Okay? But we're going to move towards how to make this tangible. Yes?
I think everything that we just talked about, doesn't this indicate on your first slide that sustainability is not there to stay? Because in a way you're talking about everyone is working in the best interest of the environment, but theory tells us that no, that's not how it works. There's always, you'll always occupy.
No, there's two things. Sorry. First, depending the scale you're talking about. So if we're talking about 50 years, yes, maybe it's not gonna exist but I don't think so, because this is irreversible what happens, and so you want to continue like this. The second thing is this is wishful thinking. This is not, I'm saying that people, that's how they manage supply chain. What I'm saying is that should be your objective, right? That's why I said it's in a classroom. Yeah. And indeed, if we do that, we're going to gain much more, right? And everybody hopefully will gain. And that will lead us to the discussion in the afternoon, okay? But this doesn't make it, right? This alignment is extremely difficult. So, at the end of the day, we're in a business to create value. How to put all this together? How do we create value? We create value, as we said, through the product that you're offering me. Remember what I said this? But we added to this the time, the availability. Remember when I said this earlier? So the options you're giving me, that's what we call flexibility of the product. This is the value proposition. And this environment has to be part of the package you're offering me. You might decide that it gives 0% weight on environment. It's your choice. Okay? What is cost is the price I'm paying. You might tell me I'm the cheapest in the market, period. From an environment, forget about it. Quality, don't let it fall. It will break. Option, you have only one option. Time, you need to order it 6 months ahead. But I'm the cheapest. That's the value I create, all right? And then the other guy that said, no, I'm the most environmentally friendly product. And by the way, you will find it quite often. I do really well on time. Time is availability. Okay? On quality, I'm not bad. Expensive. Okay? So a value proposition is the positioning. It's not the values of the organization, just to be clear. Yeah? Value proposition is why people are picking you, not your customer. And in principle, in any strategy exercise, that should be you're clear about. The thing that you're most clear about. How am I creating value to my customers? And it's not only one of these, just to be clear. It's not like you need to choose cost or this or that. It's a weighted average of these or weighted of these scores. And the weight is the strategy, define you in a unique way. That's why it's important to put this here. Because once you define what's your weight here, actually, what do you think as a overall company? I know this can be dependent on the on the type of categories of products, all right? So we're doing a really high, very high level question. What do you think you compare to others in the market on the price in general? Now, you have very different products, right? But overall, where do you stand? 10 means very expensive, 10 is very cheap, 0 is very expensive. So 10 is very expensive, very cheap, excuse me, so it's very good. 10 is very cheap, 0 is very expensive.
Sorry, I think this should be done by SKU, not by...
but not by SKU. It should be at the category level or a little bit higher, right? It's a brand type. But again, that's why I'm saying this is a dirty discussion. I mean, really high level, just to get a feeling of things. Yes?
So overall,
yeah.
So that we don't enter by SKU because we have 5,000
right.
SKUs.
No, we're not, definitely.
So in general, the entire portfolio that we carry is a premium portfolio. So to answer your question,
so it's around
8 or 9. This is
wow, 9.
Yes,
the other way around.
And again, I am excluding luxury goods. So don't compare me to a Coco Chanel. I'm talking about
the you need to compare to other.
To compare to other? No. Then we are premium in the categories that we play in.
Okay, but no, you need to go from all to if this is Coco Chanel here.
No, so we will be, I don't know, 4, 5 maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Quality.
خلص, it's the opposite, I sound.
The cheapest here.
Exactly, so Coco Chanel is not the cheapest.
Hey.
لا ما هو رجع you're right.
cheapest. يعني عندك 6 هون انت. ايه ما انا ما حددت كوكو شانيل هلا. ايه. I know, but I mean, is it 8, 7?
It will be equivalent to the price. يعني again,
more or less around 6, 7. Yeah, it doesn't need to be, by the way, but yeah. Okay. Availability. One, so 10 is best. كل شيء best 10. 10 is the highest quality. So هون يمكن quality is 4.
8.
No, this is
high quality.
Cheapest. This is highest quality.
So
this is all the best thing for the customer.
Quality.
You got my point here? This is what is best for the customer is 10, 10, 10, 10, 10. Okay? مثل 6. Thanks. It's okay. For time availability, what do you... Overall. Yeah, time availability يعني.
8.
Best. مش wishful thinking. All right. Variety. Relatively to others, it's never for you, right? So no one has more variety than you. Environmental.
Five.
I'm putting wherever. I'm not going to take a picture. Now, where would you like to be in the next few years is... Because what you are here is never perfect to where you want to be. Let's face it. We agree? You always want to do better, slightly maybe, right? Maybe on certain things you're already there, and on others you still want to improve or not. What you want to put in red is your objective. Again, we don't want to do it now. Okay? So you can say, for example, on environment, I would like to be here. Of course, I would love to be 10, but I'm saying in the next few years, my allocation of budget, that's what we're talking about, is going to go in a way that will take me from 2 to 4. This is not about wishful thinking. All right? It's allocation of resources, talent hiring, acquisitions, your action, strategic action, where it will take you with respect to your value. Am I making sense? And by putting this here at the same level than the other dimension of value creation, now Because this is not a, again, not a button you pick. I want 6, I want 5, I want 8, right? These are the result of what you're doing internally, the processes, right? The sourcing, the decision on the 6 drivers. Am I making sense? How available my information? Can I track? Can I say my product is green, right? What kind of inventory policy I'm doing? Sourcing, which suppliers I'm working with. So all these decisions you make on the 6 drivers will allow you to reach this. But your action is here. Am I making sense? But it's important to put these 2 here, because otherwise, when we're doing our resource allocation, when we're making major decisions, they're not going to be taken into account. And so that's why sustainability cannot be just, you know what, I think it's a serious issue. No. You're deciding on the score, on the value proposition. You don't believe it should take 1. You believe and you want to be a good player, it should take 8. You believe but you don't want to be a player, it takes 2. Am I making sense? So it cannot be just, and the alignment has to happen in the entire organization. In terms of KPIs, measurement, and so on, this is beyond the scope of this course. But how we cascade down these to build the right, what we call competencies. Because if you want to be the greenest in the market, you need to start yesterday by investing and selecting and pushing the right thing, right? And you can say, no, you know what, this region of the world does not need that, and I'm selecting a 3. I'm selecting a 2. We just need to realize the implication of that strategically. When we say strategically, long term. And I really mean it when I say that, it's the choice of companies to decide on this. It's not like, it's a, how do you say, rhetoric question. Everybody should be 10. No. Period. Clear? Good. So that's why I put the slides here. Link to the other. Okay? We saw it. There's nothing else to add. But to say that, putting the right scores imply working on every drawer. ما لما تعذب خلص. Thank you حبيبي. ولا يهمك. هلا يمكن عندك أقوى منا يمكن بتصير. Okay? We're clear? Yes, please.
Sorry, I have a question. Do you have any data?
Yes.
About the MENA region on companies that have adopted a clear sustainability strategy?
I don't, but I know someone here that works more on the finance and sustainability, and I can try to get this, because the idea is there's a lot of questions in the finance world about, again, what I started with supply chain, the return on investment on this, right? Are we saying people, investing more in these companies, buying more of these companies, buying from these companies more, etc. So I'll try to get you an answer because it's interesting. In fact, that's an interesting project overall, actually.
Right. Yeah. And we've taken baby steps. So we have appointed somebody responsible for sustainability. That person has done a strategic long-term plan of where we want to be in the emission areas that are related to us, because what we discovered is that a big chunk of our sustainability issues or CO2 emissions, ours is related primarily to transportation.
Of course.
But the larger part is not with us.
Right.
It is with the suppliers.
100%. But do you know about something called the LCA?
Of course.
Right.
Of course.
So this assessment is take you and your suppliers into account, 100%.
So one of the things that we will be publishing within the next few weeks, we've hired a company to measure our CO2 emissions in our key markets. So we're going to issue a scorecard for the entire organization to see where we are, because we said we have to measure it. If we don't measure it, then we cannot
manage
actions on it, right?
Right, of course.
So I feel that we have taken baby steps, but we are serious. We've committed budgets for it. and we are getting somewhere. But I wanted to benchmark where we are compared to...
I can ask and think about it, but what I want to say, based on what you're saying, is this is the you know, like you said, you cannot manage what you cannot measure. So definitely this is a, you know, you can't claim anything unless you can measure it and so on. But at the same time, you know, you need to really ask yourself, because it links to your marketing, to your budget allocation, right? This is not, so the baby steps for now, is it the beginning of being a leader on this or a follower? And as I said, you will always have a follower and always have a leader in these dimensions, right? So it doesn't make you bad or good. It has to do with your reputation, 100%. Walmart started this for sure for reputation reason, not for something else, right? And then discovered other things, okay? However, you know, it's a decision that needs to be made, that requires really brainstorming, the same way you say, do I want to add this additional brand or I want to enter this market? And maybe more important even. Yeah. And so there are a couple of things that I am, to some extent, proud of. I mentioned the quality management. Because of this whole exercise, again, I'm no expert in environment, but I really needed to understand how this, and research is not convincing enough in a sense that research on supply chain sustainability either takes already sustainability as part of it, but doesn't question it. So you know, my homework was the skeptical approach, and this is where I discovered much more things, okay? So to finish on this discussion, I claim that sustainability is an enabler of supply chain management. Let me tell you what I'm trying to say. Supply chain management started with BCG coining it like this in the 80s, right? And played the role of strategic and so on, etc. And the example of the highway, I could have given it 10 years ago without sustainability. Remember the highway and the cabs jumping? So managing system-wide has nothing to do with the sustainability component. We all know, academics and experts in supply chain, that if you want to succeed in supply chain management, you better integrate, coordinate, and work as if you're vertically integrated when you're not, while you're not. Am I making sense? The statement is crystal clear. What I'm saying is that I made this point, and the other point is said, sustainability and supply chain are interlinked. Okay? And I think we agreed on this. Now what I'm saying is, and then having Walmart in mind, sustainability is an enabler of supply chain because you tell me, in the textile, when you read the case, right? Yes. Did you find something interesting to share about the routing of the supply? Yes? Do you want to tell us, Rania? Huh? Reduce what? Transportation, distance, right? I mean, something was going out to what? To South America, right? And then it was coming back and they didn't know, right? Muhammad, do you want to say more?
Yeah, they reduced stop points. So instead of going to one market, they cut the market.
And they have in mind the sustainability.
They mentioned also about buying goods third or fourth hand instead of getting it directly from the source.
Getting it, right? What I felt was interesting, they were talking about, you know, we started learning about our own supply chain, which I thought was amazing. You know, they had this initiative, which started, let's be clear, Walmart's reputation is one of the worst in terms of women discrimination, in terms of discrimination in Africa, in terms of it was one of the worst. And, you know, I think the article started with the mistake they did, you know, with the paper towel, right? And it was ranked one of the worst from an environmental. And so they said this cannot continue. The approach was amazing, right? And we can come back to it. But what I'm trying to say is that they started on this reputation driving, right? Divided into initiative, a leader for each, smart people, you know, doing a project. And then each of them discovering about this initiative and how to be profitable as we reduce pollution. We agree to some extent? But what they discovered is solution to their own supply chain. Back to my own point. If I knew, I would have solved it myself. I would have called it sustainability or something else. But this is better for me independently of the green. Am I making sense? That's what I'm trying to say. We call this the expected unexpected. It's like opening a drawer, you know something good in it, but you don't know what it is. All right? And it's gonna, what I'm trying to say is the expected unexpected that is going to enable you to do what you're supposed to be doing as a supply chain manager. Now, why you don't do it, that's another story. You should know your supply chain. You should be able to optimize it. It should not be because someone forced you to go and realize, yeah, I could have gotten it from Abdul Rahman here. Why am I going to Elite to get it? In principle, this is an optimization of supply chain. Has nothing to do with sustainability. Am I making sense? And that's what I'm saying, right? There is opportunities there that will allow us, so it's an enabler in that sense, to have better visibility, to learn about supplier, and be able to, in many cases, or in some cases, optimize better because we have better visibility. This is kind of the point. So I have one additional reason to embrace this sustainability, not only because very much linked to supply chain, not only because this is a trend and it's forcing us from an economics point of view to take it seriously, but also because it forced me to do what I'm supposed to do from a supply chain management function. And so building this, so that's why I'm saying an enabler of SCM. Now you got that point. And here is the expected, unexpected that I manage. But this side benefit for me is really at the supply chain level, not really, a cute thing. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that there's no low complexity, everything is going to work. And Walmart is about this. Can you give me an example where in the Walmart things will not work very well, didn't work very well, for example? Electronics. What is the reason, Tony? Do you remember?
There is several reasons. One of them, clients were not accepting to pay more for not a direct result on their life. So this
customers.
Yes, customers.
Right. Yes. So this is this discussion earlier about are you ready to, right? Okay. What else? Bravo. The complexity. So in case you forget, I will repeat your question so you don't need to worry. Okay. The complexity of the supply chain, right? You can compare this to the fish initiative, right? Where the number of suppliers, right, if we go upstream, is not going exponentially. So you go from the restaurant, right, Benny restaurant, to some, let's say, supplier or, no, before there is a distributor still, right? And then there is the fisherman, right? And here you might have some, right? And here maybe two, okay? But it's still, you're not growing in complexity like with the electronics. You have here so many, and then you have a distributor, then you have a manufacturer, some, and then here you have so small suppliers, right? That in fact, every go you go back, back to the upstream, things becomes, combinatorially, exponentially more, and which becomes so hard to manage, track, and, control, right? So, again, I'm not, it's not my forte, but this is basically more a linear-like. This one is a complex exponential-like. And it's good to ask these questions. How is my supply chain, right? And, is this worth putting here and not putting here and so on? That's the entire project. And this type of person that you just mentioned, can have a team thinking about all this because that takes, a lot of effort, information, and driven by clear KPIs as well. So if I So here, a small bracket, I mentioned it as well. The years that companies have spent talking about quality management, right? And ISO is just, in some sense, a reflection of that. I don't want to reduce quality management to ISO. But it's unbelievable, right? And that's a very good thing, because now you can measure, manage. There's a process written, right, that has clear, activities, documentation, and all that. If you have taken ISO and the alike as a cost, burden, something we need because otherwise nobody will take us seriously, then this was a cost, not an investment. But if you have the culture that, in fact, we manage a system through quality. Quality, just to be clear, people confuse the notion of quality, like I throw this and it doesn't break, and managing through quality. We're talking here about quality management. What's a quality management? These are process of quality, meaning that there's a process that said, you know what, your KPI dropped below this, there must be a meeting. This meeting will go out of action. With those action, basically, we're going to start trying some solution. And then we're going to try to implement them. Based on this implementation, we decide, do we scale or not? There's a process. You cannot just leave it to one person to be proactive to solve the problem. That's quality management system. It has nothing to do that your clicker is better than mine. Motorola didn't have the best products. They have the best quality management system. They had good products, very good products. But, you know, they were named in quality management, not because their product was much better than all the others. All right? So when you have processes in place, the same way you have hiring process, distribution process, right? New product selection process, you have quality process. If you have invested in those, it's going to be so helpful in sustainability. Because if we revisit sustainability with a small caveat, and that's what I'm proud of. If you look at CO2 emission as a defect, if you look at the raw material that you're polluting using is a supply, natural resource is a supplier, then in fact, all your processes can be translated, or at least not all of them, but basically you learn a lot from that experience to implement sustainability process. And you can redefine from design to leaner is greener and so on, process that will help you to measure defect, and you decide what the defect means. Right? And so you can use the quality management system that you have to implement basically a sustainability system, right? That will enable better supply chain and hopefully will have, additional value to you. Any question on this idea? Okay. What time? I just want to talk for the next 10 minutes about one particular driver. And that driver is inventory. Okay? We'll build on this after the game. What's the reason you hold inventory? Safety stock. So what does mean safety stock? Is really Suzanne is telling us, look, I might have unexpected demand, higher than expected, and I need to hold more than I would like to, just in case, correct? To some extent. Do you agree with my? Okay, what else?
Balance demand with supply.
Balance
no out of stock, no overstocks.
Okay, so the inventory should be balanced in a way that, leftover is bad and stock out is bad. Now, how do you do this balance? Right, that's the whole trick. Hey. Okay. Forecasting is the input to the demand, but what he's saying is, even if you give me the best forecast, which we know is wrong, my definition of forecast is wrong, it has fluctuation around it, I still need to decide on the quantity based on what hurts more, whether leftover or excess. All right? Yes?
Lead times, because when I order today, I might receive in 2 months.
Okay.
So I need to have inventory for 2 months and minimum order quantities.
So just regarding this, because I always hear it a lot, notice that lead time alone is not the point, and probably there's something else in mind. Because suppose I tell you can receive every day.
Frequency
right.
of replenishment.
Right. So, because, I can order every day,
True.
and the lead time can be 2 years.
True.
And every day I'll be receiving those that I put 2 years ago, right? So yes, good. Bravo. Now you moved. What did you add to the others? Because
disruption.
Yeah, but the disruption from. Yeah, but they were focusing mainly on what part of the disruption?
Sales demand.
Bravo. So, did you mean disruption by sales demand as well?
Disruption by everything.
Yeah, but what is everything now? Right. Good. So, it can be the process variability, not only the demand variability, right? So, inventory, what you're telling me, it allows me to decouple things, right? If you think about it, putting inventory on the shelf, decouple the demand that is arriving consumption with the supply process. Are we clear? I decouple them. And in order to be able to decouple them, I put a buffer in between. But what you're saying is that we can use that same trick to decouple other issues, not only just at the shelves at the end. Correct? So if my supply, for example, COVID came, and now you just say, okay, am I going to be able to replenish again? If I'm not, then I might want to consider ordering for certain items larger in order to decouple the supply that is affected by other things, right? My suppliers, with my own process of, selling and so on. Correct? Good. What else? The new hands. Yeah, Tony.
The economy of scale.
Bravo. What do you mean by this? Excellent.
Once we buy a lot, we will pay less for the
right. So kind of discount and so on, like purchasing power, right? Very good. Yeah, it could be, but I mean, to some extent linked. But what do you have anything else also in mind, like cash flow? Yeah. More assets. Correct. Very true. Very, very true. So at the end of the day, you have choices to make, right? Because you have some kind of budget that you want to allocate, and more of this, means less of the other, for example, right? And what is the frequency at which you order, etc. 100%. But why I'm holding it is, what I want is to use this, whether cash flow or financial performance, to decide on, how much to order and so on, right? But why I'm ordering is also to manage my assets in the most effective way to some extent. What else? There's something probably also is missing. Which it may be, yeah. Right? So there's some kind of this seasonality maybe or something. Sorry? That could be another one which is very different, right? So it can be strategic, right? I want to have, order a lot to show really that I became the monopoly on this, etc., or my market share, etc., which is different. Then, there are, for example, soup is during this period, and I'm going to be ordering more. If I'm doing wine, then I'm going to, have to produce during this period because this is where the grapes are available, and so on and so forth, correct? So there is some kind of economic cycle that is imposed on me, right? It could be also that my own distributor or the manufacturer only ship during these times. I cannot just choose when I want, right? You wanted to add something?
Yeah, I wanted to add something related to my customers. Maybe I want to satisfy them all the time and to make it long-term.
Which will link to the safety stock. If you really, and back to the discussion earlier, if you want your customer satisfaction between quotation higher than competition, then has to do with your value proposition. You're telling the world, my products are always there. That I want to be famous for that. That has a price. Which means that when we were discussing earlier on this, the cost of stock out for me is way more expensive than leftover because there's nothing free, right? If you want to have low stock out, then there's a bigger chance of leftover, right? And back to her point, now you have cash sitting, money sitting on the shelves that is, right.
It could be as well part of the KPIs imposed by the supplier that you must be carrying.
That's part of the economic order cycle to some extent. Yes, 100%, which basically it's imposed on me a certain minimum quantity or a frequency at which it could be. Yes.
It could be price hedging.
Right. That's the one that I thought would be also speculation, maybe, or something, right? We expect the euro to change, etc., and I use my inventory as a way, right? So Southwest success, you know Southwest, it's a low-cost airline. Major success for years was because of their, hedging with respect to fuel. So they bought options on fuel, right? That actually allowed them that when the price of fuel went up, they were actually much cheaper than everybody else and able to offer very low prices.
Value adding and customization.
So can you elaborate if you don't mind, Mohammed?
So I take the inventory and I do changes on it. I do promotions, co-packing.
Right. So, so basically you're ordering the quantity that is not customized and you work on it, right? Which is a local, in some sense, effort to create additional value on it. Yeah. And that's actually interesting. We'll discuss this afternoon, actually, how, because it's linked to something called the postponement strategy. Anything else to add on inventory? We know why. Let me approach it differently in this way. I'm going to close this. And suppose I tell you this, okay? What's the most product that basically doesn't fluctuate, forecasting is boring almost. What is it for you? Like
sugar.
Sorry?
Sugar.
Sugar? Rice. Okay, good.
Flour.
So let's take rice. But these are, sorry? So it's a product where demand is more or less flat. And so for sugar you buy forward, no? Or how do you buy it? Detergent?
Like Ariel.
Okay.
So Ariel does not fluctuate a lot with seasonality.
So can we take Ariel if you don't mind?
Let's take Ariel.
Ariel with an E.
Yes.
So think of Ariel. What's the quantity we're talking here per year? Let's say Lebanon. 200? 200 times 12 a day, 2,400. Unit? Okay. All right. Now, of course, it does fluctuate. We agree. Okay. Now I tell you, how much should you order from this item? I'm talking mainly to those that don't order at Transmed. Okay? But I want the others to start thinking as well. Okay? I could have told you white shirts. هيك بنبعد عن الindustry. Okay? I'm selling white shirts. All right? That's why I said Ari. It happens to be white as well. And then we're basically deciding on the inventory policy to some extent, right? I'm curious if you prefer we stay with white shirt or Ariel, etc. But it's something that is not demand. You cannot tell me, oh, give me demand. Oh, demand is more or less stable. Okay? How much do you order? This is 2,400 per year, we said, correct? People think, let me tell you why I'm telling you this, and it's not necessarily obvious, but for the sake of time, I'm not opening discussion of half an hour. People might think that, okay, give me demand, I tell you how much I should order. It doesn't go wrong. Every time I ask the question in general, without explaining white shirt and so on, and I say, okay, how are we going to order quantities? People answer is, okay, what's the demand? Of course, demand is important. You're not going to order independently of the demand. I don't disagree. But it sounds as if that's it. You give me the demand, it's done. Okay? So what I do is I say, okay, let's kill the demand. The demand is constant. Every month you're going to sell exactly this. Not one more, not one less. Do you know how to order? So what's the lead time? Lead time is I'm going to put 2 months. Doesn't matter. No, because you don't need to order now. You can wait. You see what I mean? You don't need to order now, right? It's when to order. So we agree that inventory policy is go back to two things. How much and when. I want to focus first on how much. The when has to do with the lead time. برافو. أول شغلة مش ضروري time is decision making. You need to promise me at the end of this day. Any decision making needs to have criteria crystal clear. Of course, there are a lot of things you make decisions on, right? But important ones, in particular, repetitive one, they need crystal clear criteria. Because how do I judge that you did, you put this, not this? If the alternative is to turn left or right, how are you going to do it? I feel like. Okay? It needs a clear criteria. And when we start thinking about criteria, we realize that, there's some interesting thing about inventive. So what's the criteria, which we call the objective, that will make, and the criteria is not like something that, you need, again, expertise to come up with. Just minimize, let's say, cost, total cost per year, or profit per year. But you need it clear. Once we talk about this, let's focus on cost, but you will see that actually it's linked to profit, so it's not different. When we say total cost per year, what are the costs? It costs you something, this unit. You agree, this Ari? Let's call it C. How much? Okay, this is confidential. So give me an idea of cost of a unit. $2, $1, whatever. Can I put $1? Okay. All right. So let's put C equal 1. Okay. So if C equal to 1, at the end of the year, how many are you gonna buy? If you're selling exactly 2,400 by the end of the year, how much you're gonna be buying at the end? 2,400. So the cost of the unit itself has no value, because whether you order the 2,400 in one shot, this is time, and you order the 2,400 and you basically deplete it through the year, or you buy 500, whatever, 500 something, right? 600. You agree in a simplified way? Horizontal axis time, vertical axis quantity. An extreme case is ordering the 2,400 one shot, and then Silvana will go crazy, right? You're using all my cash for what, right? Or basically start ordering small quantities. Will be the other extreme. Everybody else agree? In both cases, it's going to cost you 2,400 times $1. So this is not, exactly, that's what I want to go to. What we're saying is that, the decision of how much and when is not the cost of the unit. Of course, you're right, Tony, purchasing power will help. If I can get a better discount with a higher quantity, I have higher incentive to order a higher quantity. But there are two costs that are not part of the unit cost, which are, but logistics is holding cost.
Ordering cost.
And holding cost has nothing to do with the rent. Because rent is fixed. Whether you order this, or this, or this, you're paying the rent. So it doesn't mean the rent is not important. But it doesn't play a role in deciding whether should I order this, or this, or that. Everybody's clear? Yeah. What plays a role in this is, the cost of capital. That's why it's really important. This is not something like, if we want to take it. Cost of capital, which means what? The opportunity cost of holding an additional unit on my shelf somewhere else. شو somewhere else? Not. People tell me interest rate. If you got a loan of 5%, then the holding cost is 5%. Nobody will reduce their inventory and go pay a loan. If you reduce inventory from somewhere, you will put it in another product that has another opportunity. What's the opportunity on this one? 12%, 20%? That's your holding cost. So every time you're holding an additional unit, that's what you're missing out. And if it's 20%, then the holding cost is 20% of $1 per unit. Everybody's clear? And then the second one, now there are other holding costs. For example, you know, we did this project with the Pepsi bottling company in Saudi, and basically the guy was telling us, look, sometimes the guys in sugar, that's why I thought I was asking about sugar, the financial guy orders sometimes, when they see speculation, higher quantities of sugar. And sometimes too high, then we receive them for free. It's part of the contract that you receive the sugar free to their warehouse. The problem is the quantity is too large, the warehouse is not enough. They will have to rent another one that will require transportation to the assembly line. And that the financial guy is not seeing it. Everything he is looking, it was a he, that basically speculation, oh, this is really good price of sugar, let's order much bigger. And if you don't actually account it, then you will not order the right quantity. Am I making sense? And now rent of this new place is a holding cost.
Now you're making sense for transport.
Okay, so that's a holding cost. Now, on the other one is ordering cost. And what we ordering cost is the cost of fixed cost every time you order. Okay, so it could be a fixed transportation cost you have to pay, whether you order 250 or 300 or 400, right? But all your fixed costs per order. Right? I'll show you this after the game in the afternoon, but I really wanted to send a strong message that decisions like inventory, which is your bread and butter, and other things as well, have to always driven by clear objective criteria that you spelled out at least once. So we know why we're doing this and why, you know, whether we're doing a good job or not relatively to this criteria, not something else. Right? So stock out for me, come and tell you, why you have 10% stock out? You missed on a lot. If the cost drove this, which we all agreed on the objective, this is life. But if actually you did it because you felt like, then I need to penalize you. Am I making sense? So I don't look at the outcome. I look at the decision-making process. More importantly than an outcome, which could be bad or good, because there's uncertainties. Clear? All right.
They give you the easiest example.
Exactly. No, but that's why we have the afternoon, Susan. Yeah, that's another story. That is very true. Very true. Perishable items is a different story. But it has its own niceness as well. All right. We stop. Is it a good time to stop? Yeah. And then we'll take 45 minutes. So,
exactly.
Yeah.
45 minutes, and we come back here before we go to the beer game in the other room. Or you'd like?
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, it's not. That's a good point. Yes, let's go back here.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.